Portions of the following episode were recorded at the 2023 Michigan Council of Teachers of Mathematics Conference. The theme of this episode is experimenting. In that spirit, we experimented with a different approach to recording the audio, but there are still some issues. We appreciate your understanding. We are grateful to the wonderful educators that joined the session and shared their experiences and expertise. The following people gave us permission to share their thinking with you: Kathy Coffey, Brian Dotson, Kim Fox, Jill Gums, Tara Maynard, Laura Percival, Ginger Rohr, Stephanie Shooks, and Ryan Slomka. Welcome, I'm Dave.
I'm John.
And this is Teaching Like Ted Lasso. John and I do a podcast called Teaching Like Ted Lasso, and we're recording for the podcast. One of the reasons we got this started was we wanted to hear the voices of teachers, and we wanted to hear what you are doing and connect it with what we saw as themes of the show. And today, the theme we want to talk about is experiments. Our goal for today is think about how do we experiment in our classrooms in order to improve our practice. It's certainly one of the key themes to the show. So this is your spoiler warning. There'll be some things that we talk about, but no major spoilers. Lego series play is often connected with the building of a metaphor or telling a story. And what's interesting, in season 3 of Ted Lasso, we're introduced to a story through Legos. What's going on in terms of relationships with some of the characters based on a Lego stadium that Ted's son, Henry, has built. And so what does that mean for these relationships? So what I'd like you all to do, though, is think about a metaphor for teaching math. And again, with the Legos, take a couple of minutes and build a metaphor for what it means to teach mathematics. So take a moment and tell your group, explain what the metaphor is and why.
I guess it's like a mountain line. There's a mountain, and you feel like the mountain is like a line around. But really, like when you get past that idea, like you really can enjoy the mountain. Wait, when you're really in there, you see these like beautiful things, and you're going through it. That really is a mountain to climb.
So could I get a couple of people who would be willing to share what they built and why?
I think our whole table should share, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
They are all kind of related, so we'll see if you guys can maybe draw the relation at the end. So I did math is like outer space. And so that's the sun, outer space around it, because it's vast and there's just an infinite possibilities.
Teaching math is like tending a forest. You need to know the species of trees, what each one needs. It takes time and nurturing.
I have math. Teaching math is like the ocean.
Teaching math is like a puzzle.
And they all come together.
Can I be honest, I was really excited to hear how you were going to tell me about how teaching math is like Batman.
Oh. That's I only thought it was Batman.
I'm sorry to let you down.
I think that worked out.
I love gingers because I keep thinking about Coach Beard talking about how the forests work together too, right? The trees, it's a collective, and they work together to support each other.
We didn't hear his. Can we take a minute to hear?
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
Share?
This is all about you guys.
Yeah, I made that's a firework, and then this is the fuse, and it got lit. So everybody's firework is going to go off and explode, but it's the teacher's job to light it, and you have to be patient enough to wait until however long that fuse is to see the beautiful and pretty explosion that happens.
Good one.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I think teaching math is like Batman because we have no superpowers, but we're ready for every challenge.
So part of what happens on the podcast, we do want to think about teaching like Ted Lasso. So we're looking for themes, and we do share some scenes. So this is a scene.
So Ted Lasso is a character on the show.
Right.
And you don't mean necessarily teach like
That character, no. In fact, it's a very ensemble-driven show, and so we're looking at all of the characters. In this scene, it happens to be Ted, but there are other places where we might lean into one of the other coaches or somebody, one of the players or things like that. The following is a scene from season 1, episode 3.
So I am officially on the prowl for any new ideas, you hear?
Oh.
You got something, Nate?
No. No. God, no. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Come on now, you're one of us. Let's go. Fire away. What do you got?
Okay, right. It's just, oh, no, in the pocket. It's just something that I thought of. Oh, not that one. You know what? It's not even very good. It's probably really bad. You know what? It's embarrassing even.
Sorry, Nate. I have a real tricky time hearing folks that don't believe in themselves, so I'm gonna ask you real quick again. Do you think this idea will work?
Yeah, I do.
Whoa! Why are you screaming at us, Nate? We're right here. All right, come on now. Walk us through it.
Okay, so I thought if we started the attack on the wing, Jamie could run through near side, and when the defence follows, Sam could fill his spot.
So use Jamie as a decoy?
No. No. Well, in this case, yes.
Let's give it a shot.
What, you're going to use my play?
Yeah, we're going to try it on, see if it fits. You know, it might not. Then again, it might be a very flattering silhouette. I might wear it right out of the store. Makes me feel good. I start to strut. I'm like, ooh, I like this. I like the way this makes me feel. Show me the strut, coach. Yeah, there you go. Yep, that's how it is. Strut, Nate. Come on. Boom. There you go, Nate. Yeah, that's one way to do it. There you go. You're a little angry, but that's all right. That's my fault. I forgot to pitch it out this way. Come on, let's go. Strut this way. Here we are. Good.
First, can we talk about the scene for just a second? So what did you guys hear in that scene? How does it connect to this idea of experiment?
They have a brand new idea. They don't know if it works or not. It might fail, but they're going to try it anyways.
Yeah.
But some kids are so reluctant to put it out there. Like you can see the hesitation of not wanting to start or not, digging, no, not that one.
I don't think just kids too.
Oh, true,
like,
100%.
Yeah, like teachers too.
They don't want to
Trying
try.
something new is hard.
It's very
Yeah.
stressful.
So solicit ideas from like the people at the bottom of the organization about how to improve things rather than always the top layer.
Yeah, even if you don't know any of the backstory, you can tell that Nate does not feel like a participant in this.
Yeah, he's cleaning the garbage.
Yeah. I liked the metaphor of the dancing because it's so vulnerable to dance, but when you're dancing, it is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you build the capacity for people to try dancing and have vulnerability to dance with you and then find that joy in learning and trying something new and experimenting?
Thank you for sharing that. So as we think about this idea of experimentation, right, even just the word experiment brings to mind scientists and laboratories, right? So how are we thinking about teachers as experimenters? Right, so take just a second to talk at your table. How do you see a teacher as an experimenter? I love getting teachers started talking. I hate having to interrupt. There's a quotation up here that Dave is, in particular, sometimes draws on Hattie for inspiration. So the remarkable feature of the evidence is that the greatest effects on student learning occur when teachers become learners of their own teaching, and when students become their own teachers. So Dave, what is it that jumps out at that quote to you about this idea of experimenting?
Well, I was lucky to be in Tara's session earlier, and as she was talking about all of the work that she's done to create workshops and stations, she talked very much about what she's learned from the experience. It wasn't something that you knew to do from the beginning.
And it's still not. I mean, every time you do it, you learn, oh, I could have done that better. That direction should have been better. I should have placed that somewhere different. And it's different. We just talked about first hour versus second hour.
Mm-hmm.
This can go great with one group of kids, but then you try it with the same exact activity with the next group of kids, and it's a disaster. So then how do you explain it to that group different the next time you do it? Because you're going to try it again, because if it didn't go right, you got to try it again. And then how do you, how do you change that direction again?
There were lots of rich conversations going on. What did you hear at your table?
We talked a little bit about because Stephanie had shared that she has a lot of ideas, and then she's like, sometimes she's like, I'm just going to go for it. And then I had asked, what conditions help you build that risk capacity, that welcome that risk taking? And so we talked about having relationships with students in our classroom where we felt that the students trusted us and allowed us to make mistakes too, and we were together as learners. And Ryan shared about having partners, colleague partners, that either you plan together or you take risks together, or at least even just having someone to talk through ideas with, building that risk tolerance.
That's such a huge piece of it. Other people, what did you hear?
We talked about how we're working with people in education and teaching. We're not working with plastic and metal and acrylic and things, like people, and teaching is inherently relational. So that idea that you're going to always be experimenting because relationships are unpredictable, people are unpredictable.
These ideas aren't new, right? Like, this is something we've known about teaching. And I always love when, like, the conclusion of some big research study is something, and I think, like, John Dewey said that, right? He espoused the idea of an iterative approach to advance education. Great teaching needs to be observed, analyzed, expanded on, tested, and improved. So I just want you to think about that for your own teaching for a second, right? Like, so where is the iteration coming from? Sometimes it feels obvious, like Tara was saying, oh, that bombed. Right? You have immediate visceral feedback, right? But how else? Like, what kicks off that iterative cycle? And the two parts of it are, like monitoring, how did that go? And then what am I going to monkey with? What am I going to change for the next time? So go ahead and take a minute to talk at the tables.
My first opinion of this is the quote starts off with great teaching.
This part of the discussion felt really intense, like it's like kind of buckling down, getting to the nuts and bolts. One of the show connections here is that Ted is kind of famous for his mustache, and people on the show at one point are shocked to find out it was not always a mustache. He had to go through other facial hairs before he wound up with this iconic mustache. So even something that at some point we might be famous for, or other people know us for, that's not where we start. Tara, I might ask you, because we get to send a lot of our student teachers to Tara's classroom, and
I gladly accept them.
it's an amazing experience. And Tara will sometimes check with us ahead of time. It's like, is this somebody who's gonna work? Could you share what you were sharing at the table?
When I read that, I immediately thought about hosting a student teacher. And they have to observe so many times, even as a veteran teacher, you're sitting in PD and they tell you, you gotta do this. These are the 3 things you gotta do. This is what it's gonna look like. And you don't know what it's gonna look like. It's just described to you, or you're supposed to read an article and then do it. Well, I think that observation key it's such a big part of learning how to do something. And I would say, like, when hosting those pre-service teachers, they have to observe, but then right next hour, now you get to do it. And like talk about, okay, this just didn't go well first hour, so what can we do to change it? Now make it your own, tweak it for second hour, so analyze it, now expand on it, we're gonna test it again. And then, okay, well, who wants to do a 5th hour? Like, we'll take what we learned first and second hour, redo it again 5th hour. You wanna do it or you want me to do it? Like, you gotta let them observe though. I think too many times, they either observe too long and don't get in the mix, or they just go, oh, go do it. Well, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's nice to get a good observation, but you don't want them to observe garbage. Sometimes it's okay to have a bad example, because then you pick up what you don't want to do.
One of the things that you're saying I hear is that idea of observing takes some of the pressure off, and so you can have a more focused intention when you're diving in, because teaching is so much. So by either framing it or getting to observe how you did all these other things in a way, almost subconscious, but then discussing this part, that's what that person can really focus on when they're going in, and they've kind of picked up some things that they don't, because teaching, I think in our keynote, we talked about all the different things that we have to decide and all those discretions, right? And so there's so much, but if we can have like a focus, or we identify focus, or we see something and we can kind of dive deep on that, or observe that, or analyze that, and then move on to the next thing that you think is exciting, or dive deeper, or stretch, or grow, or whatever. That helps. But if you have to do all of it all at the time, and I think sometimes with evaluation and observation, it's observing everything, and so it puts a lot of pressure, and it stifles some growth. So if you can focus intentionally on something specific, then I think you do see some good growth.
Well, and that goes to the puzzle. I mean, you made a puzzle and you made a puzzle of math is like, and that's, you're gonna do this little thing, and then this piece is gonna fit here, and then this one's gonna come here, and then it still has no edges, but we just keep making the puzzle.
Be really mindful of the big picture and also
Right.
the detail. The
Right.
big picture and this detail.
Yeah, thank you. Other tables, what did you hear?
We heard Kathy describe a protocol that she worked with as a coach in a classroom that gave that teacher a tool to do this cycle in a daily basis or
On a daily basis.
on a daily basis. So like really narrowing in and less about the whole of teaching, but like when one is teaching, having a tool, a protocol to run through that actually helps us get through these observation, analyze, test, and improve can be really valuable.
Yeah, it's a protocol called Do Now at the beginning of the class and an exit ticket. The exit ticket, so the Do Now has one quick review question and one question related to the learning target of that lesson. And that, in the beginning, was new to both of us. So it was like, that was the challenge, was what to pick as the review and what am I gonna use for, what is the learning target? Like, you really have to know. And then they do that, then while the students are doing something, the teacher kind of goes through and kind of sorts a quick sort into has it or almost, with no names, just, and then shares with the students, okay, 17 out of 24, not yet, and the exit ticket is the exact same question from the lesson, so it's keeps it simple, right? You don't have to create a third thing. And they do that same question then at the end, and then the teacher does the same thing, real quick sorts, and okay, now 22 out of 24, and it helped the teacher focus in on their learning target, and somehow it was a third grade classroom, unbelievably motivating for the students, because they really wanted to increase that at the end. I don't know what the phenomenon is, but what it did is allowed her to analyze, and then she could observe the work they did to see, even the ones who didn't have it had something more than they had at the beginning.
That's interesting. So one of the things I heard as I was kind of eavesdropping was how many of you kind of share this process with your learners. Like there's ways that they know that you're working on this. And just like that, that really invites them in. Like if even you, the teacher, are still working on this stuff, how could they not be a part of that? If those relationships are built. It keeps coming back to the cat.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
It's a cat.
Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't get a chance to explain that out loud. So how did you connect the cat to the teaching?
I just said that, like, students and sometimes students learning math, you really have to like work for their love and respect, and so like cats, they're just not like friendly off the bat. You kind of got to work for that affection.
They're not puppies. You get a couple puppies, right? In class, but.
I don't know your name.
Jill.
Jill. You also talked about growth mindset as it relates to this, and then had an acronym for FAIL.
Oh, a first attempt in learning.
And so again, do we give ourselves and do we give our learners that permission to fail? First attempt in learning. One of the reasons I bring that up is because our expert guest, Ela Ben-Ur, added failure, first attempt in learning, unless reflection exists. Ela is the creator of Innovators Compass. I know some of you are familiar with that work. John and I both feel very strongly that doing math and teaching math are both problem-solving activities. And what Ela did was introduce me, back to Ginger's point, introduce me to a problem-solving protocol, a problem-solving tool called Innovators Compass that helped me to be able to make the work that we do more intentional, whether we're talking about the math or whether we're talking about math teaching. The Teaching Like Ted Lasso podcast is happy to welcome Ela Ben-Ur. Hi, Ela.
Hello.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, Ela?
My background is in design thinking from MIT and IDEO, but I have had the opportunity to work with many, many, many different people, many different experts, many different everyday people in the decade since that time. And I've made it my mission to try to make our best ways of getting unstuck accessible for every person and moment. I don't know how far back you want me to go, but that I think has always been my mission. That has manifested into taking all these amazing things I've had the experiences with, from design thinking to leadership practices to, how people do therapy, how people make startups better, how people solve engineering problems, how people bring communities together, and find that they seem to have some common questions. That became Innovators Compass, which is all free resources in innovatorscompass.org, but it's basically the mission work I do in the world, just making those best ways of getting unstuck accessible for every person and moment.
Are you familiar with Ted Lasso?
I have to confess that I have certainly heard of the show, but I have not watched that or really any television in a long time.
Well, it's not a requirement for the podcast. We've had plenty of people on who haven't seen it. But yeah, if you get a chance, I think you would find a lot of connections to just what you were talking about, goals of your own work. So. But one of the things that they do in the show is ask some kind of weird questions to get to know people. And one of those questions was your all-time favorite Julie Andrews character.
I think I've only really seen her in a couple of things, The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. Maybe she's been like hidden in other roles that I've forgotten or didn't notice in the first place. But those are kind of both similar, right? They're both nannies. But I think if I had to pick between them, it would have to be Mary Poppins because, a little magic never hurts.
So you talked a little bit about Innovators Compass, Ella. Why did you develop this? And you've got this idea of supporting people, but why and how did you develop the compass?
The why has been, I think, a part of me for a really long time. My parents are immigrants. My sister is a disabled woman, and I went to school deep in Milwaukee in a neighborhood with its challenges. And I think that, I think I saw a lot of both people stuck, but also people getting unstuck that inspired me a lot. And I think that contrast was really deeply motivating to me. And it was human. It was about people, not processes and problems. And then, I went my wayward way, which is, don't get me wrong. Actually, I really appreciate everything that I did and developed and everything else at MIT and IDEO. But when I left those institutions, I went back out in the world and was just back out there to just sort of help, in whatever way, whether it was me or design thinking that I brought with me or whatever it was, how can I help people, get unstuck? And I've started to, over all my years while I was at IDEO, I was there for 13 years. I was doing workshops, for IDEO for our clients, and I was teaching at Olin College, and with a lot of stuff, like all the trappings of the lingo of design thinking. In fact, half your listeners may never have heard of design thinking, and it's fine, it doesn't matter. When I left, I found that I had a real kind of allergy to teaching, and to seeing and hearing people, go through things like, wait, what are we doing? Or how does this relate to, my daily life? Or this isn't quite how I'm creative. Like I was just having an amazing conversation with my partner and then you cut me off. Like those moments were just really like, I don't think this is why I'm in this work. I don't think this is what I'm here for. And so I couldn't articulate it this way until later, but I really started to desperately want to unleash and not teach. I was pretty sure that all the humans in the classroom or conference room or whatever place I was, there with me, had plenty in them to be able to unstick their own challenges. And my goal was, that they didn't have to get stuck on the stuff that I was sharing and have to figure out what I was saying and what I meant, and how to do it before they could start like just unsticking their own stuff. And that was really hard, but that was one big why. And the other was that I just felt like there was so much amazingness out there that you either start to try to teach everything, like thousands of methods from lots of different processes, like, oh my gosh, but you got to see this, and you got to see this, and oh, this is what community organizers do, and this is what therapists do, and this is what leadership trainers do, and you just like load people down with more and more stuff, or it forces you to go to completely the other way and try to sense, well, what I think behind all this sort of specialized, words and ways that those people all go about helping people make things better and get unstuck, there's something in common. And the clue for me was really in what it felt like for myself as a designer at IDEO, what did it feel like? What were the creative moves that got us unstuck from what is happening right now? Like being able to see that in new ways and see new futures and make those happen. What did that actually feel like? And I started to sort of sense the compass in that and see that same compass in so many other ways of making things better alone and together in our life, work, and world. And so then I became just fascinated with that and wanted to bring it out in a way that wasn't like hidden in all of these things, because they're not accessible to us when they're hidden in all these different books and processes, and they're also hidden inside us. Like I said, I had kids around the same time, and I could see that this is the way they operate, right? And it's hidden it's hidden deep inside us, and it gets kind of, this is cliche to say, but it gets kind of buried and hidden away, through a lot of schooling, because it's not what's valued and celebrated and developed. And so it's hidden in all these places that we cannot access it, but we really have all the ingredients, and they're the same things that, all these different processes and tools and books are telling us to do again, because we haven't developed them. We haven't had the chance to practice them from when we were little. So those were some of the drivers that really made me want to just be like, okay, let's figure out what this compass is, and let's find out how to represent it in a way that is immediately usable and shareable by any person in any situation. And that was really hard. It turned out it took a bunch of years to get to what seems amazingly deceptively simple, but hopefully simple and powerful enough for any person and situation. So the hope is that it really is an unleash, and it's nothing to teach. Like, I do think that we ask these questions. Maybe without further ado, can I share Innovators Compass?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Literally, it says on top, 5 ways we move forward in any challenge, big or small. With and for everyone involved, we explore new possibilities in these 5 questions. It's a circle in the center, and it's red, and it has 2 people in it with little hearts in them. The question there is, who's involved, or are people in any situation? And then there's this compass, and we go down to the lower left, and that brings us down to details. It's the bottom part of the compass, what's happening in the past and present, and we're looking to just see what's happening and why right now, right? Like, just like someone came to you with a feeling down about something, you'd see them as a person first, and then you'd probably say, hey, what's happening? Like, try to understand, what's happening and why. Gather some real observations to go on. There's 2 pictures here, like an upper picture frame and a lower picture frame. You probably try to find some upsides that are happening, and maybe some, what are the downsides of what's happening? You try to understand. Everybody does these things, right? Everybody says, hey, what's going on? You look down. And then zooming up, the top of the compass is big picture. You went from details, you zoom up to big picture. Find the question, what matters most? Because we can get stuck, overwhelmed with all the things that are happening. And so being able to see the big picture, hey, what matters most about all of that, so that I can focus. There's a star here because those are your guiding stars, or your North Star, or the things that you star, like on your page, right? On your to-do list, the things that matter most. And then we go over to the top right, and we find we're still big picture, but now we're moving from past and present to the future. And we're looking for the big picture of what ways, plural, are there, to do what matters most, or ideas. And there's a fluffy, blue sky cloud here, because these can be fluffy, dreamy, blue sky ideas. We have to have space to do that. We can be stuck, seeing no way or only one way to do what matters. Either of those is kind of stuck, right? Because if it's like my way or the highway, that doesn't work so well. Or just kind of like meh ways, right? That we're not really excited about, that aren't really, we're not going to get to the moon unless we shoot the stars, right? So that's that space. That's that space to dream. But we all ask that, like, okay, well, we really want to go to New York. What ways are there to do that, right? We all ask these questions. None of them are rocket science. And then we come back down to details and of the future and say, okay, well, what's the step to try, right? Like, if we decide, oh, I think we're going to do the train, well, we're not going to get on that train unless there's a who, what, when, where, how, to get on the train. It just remains an idea. So what's a step to try? And the picture here is a pile of blocks that are kind of tipping over. They go from big on the bottom to small on top, and they weren't tipping over until my then 4-year-old daughter said, well, experiments are kind of like, they don't usually work at first. Didn't that pile look like it's falling over? And I kind of cringed, which was exactly why I realized they should be falling over, because we need to get used to that. We need to be comfortable with that. And, it's the top one that's falling off. It's a little bitty one. It's no big deal, right? And as you go, you build up, and the blocks get more solid, and you have bigger blocks, and you'll build your way there. This is just the first step, and you'll learn from it, and you'll go on. And so, while they are numbered, because that is the way that most processes will have you go, the safe thing to do is to see people, what's happening for them, what matters most for them, before you start throwing out a bunch of ideas to change things. But they're really just 5 ways that we move forward, and we use these piecemeal all the time, right? Like, your kid start listing all the things that they want to do or they need to do, and you're like, okay, well, which one matters most to you right now? You ask these questions all the time when you get unstuck, when you move forward in powerful ways, and when we don't, we're missing something somewhere. So let's just name them. That is an Innovators Compass. It's 5 questions that move us forward.
One of the things that we're trying to get through this podcast, and in particular through this episode, is really help teachers see what it takes to be experimenters in their own classroom. I don't want to gloss over all 5 of those questions are important, and our participants will have a chance to look at all 5 of them. But if you were going to give some detail about how to do the experiment part, I think that would be helpful.
To me, one of the simplest ways to think about how to explore any of these things is, first of all, to use periods to unpack what you think, but then look for some exclamation points, some ahas, right? Like find new possibilities. And then the last one, but really the most exciting one, is the question mark. When in doubt, let it out. Just pop a question mark on it when you don't know, or to let thoughts come and go. And then this cue card has 2 prompts for each of the spaces, for each of the questions. One is to find more exclamation points, more ahas, and then there's a prompt around question marks, how to find those. So this is the greatest detail. So I'm going to literally read what is on here about experiments. So experiments, what's a step to try? So the exclamation point aha tip is make it small. Think $1, 1 day, 1 person, or 1 part of an idea. And it's pointing to the little bitty cube, the little bitty block on the top of the stack. And now pointing to details, small with specific details. So small and specific, like who, what, when, where, how, until you'll try it. If it's not happening yet, it needs to be smaller and or more specific until it happens. Like, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh, I just did that. Look at that. How cool is that, right? So that's the aha. That's the aha, right? That you come to, like, oh my God, I just did that. The question mark prompt is to focus on the question marks you found above, right? So when you were like, oh, I'm actually not really sure what's happening. I don't know why he's late to school every day, question mark. And so the question mark tip is simply to focus on question marks that you found before, and then go back and see what happens, right? So an experiment can be trying out part of an idea, but it might actually be finding out more about what's happening. Like, I'm going to go try asking, I'm going to try watching and see which days he's late and not and why, or I'm going to go ask him more about it. That can be an experiment. It doesn't have to be trying out an idea, but that's it. Those are the 2 tips. Make it small, $1 a day, person, or part of idea with specific details like who, what, when, or how until you try it, and focus on questions you found and go see what happens again.
When I've seen you present on this, Ella, you often, when we're into that experiment piece, ask them to think about something that they can specifically do in the next week. Do you still try to do that? Do you still espouse that as you're doing that work?
Yeah, I really love, so here I say small and specific. So they have to pick a who, what, when, where, and how. And I guess it doesn't technically have to be in the next week, but it's good if it is. I do really like the framing that I've heard of someday and Monday. So the someday is like the ideas space, right? All these ways I could possibly do this someday. And experiments is like the Monday, right? Like, so you have to pick a specific when, and no, it probably shouldn't be in 3 weeks because you're going to completely forget about it by then. Or it's too big, right? If you think that it's going to take you 3 weeks, to be able to do this thing, maybe what can you try that's smaller? That is right now. And the best is if it's in the next 24 hours, because that's when you'll remember it, or the very next thing you do.
What are some ways teachers have used the compass to support their practice?
I always try to make sure that, in like my workshops with educators, I invite them to first and foremost use it on whatever is most on their minds. Mm-hmm. What is most useful for you? You are stuck in this workshop or chose to be in this workshop for an hour. What is most useful for you to figure out, right? Like something that is either like an amazing opportunity you're really excited about, or something you're really worried about, or maybe a little bit of both, and you don't have it quite figured out yet. let's do that, right? Let's focus on you. Let's help you feel these different emotions. We'll have you pair together and like push each other in these directions. What am I going to actually try on Monday, to use these 5 questions in some way? So yes. And then of course, when you do that, you should identify the 10,000 ways you want to use it in the classroom with your kids and ways you want to use it, on your own with your family or your peers or just in your own life. And you can totally like start working on those, but not until after you've given yourself the chance to do it for yourself on, whether it's your lesson planning. I know that's something that you think about, right? Using it for lesson planning, or, an issue you're seeing in your school that's really bothering you, or, whatever it is.
On your website, innovatorscompass.org, and we'll have links to all of these resources in our show notes. You have there some examples of how teachers have used the compass.
If you look under the examples tab, pull down has life and family, but also school and college. And so there's a bunch there.
You've been very gracious with your time, Ella. And as always, this has been wonderful. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Dave, and everybody listening.
Very simple, very straightforward. It was really helpful for me, again, to have this tool to start thinking about helping teachers improve their practice, helping students improve their mathematical problem solving. So, and I love when she says we do this all the time, and again, I connect it with Ted Lasso because there's so many examples of that in Ted Lasso. One of the things we haven't really talked about is this idea of practice. This is actually in the game. They're running Lasso Special. They've gone through this multiple times. Those of you who are coaches know you go to practice, right? You run the plays, you tweak the plays, you figure out what's working and what needs work. Then our experiments tend to get better and better and better because the work is more focused. What questions might you have about the compass?
How do you use it in teaching?
How do you use it in teaching? All right. Ella said these numbers go in order for people like me who need to think literally and do that, but you can start anywhere. So what I'd like you to start with is that build that you made, the Batman or the space or the tree or the cat or whatever, and put that in your principles. That's what matters most for you as you're thinking about your teaching. So start there. That'll give you direction. And then at the top, think about what's your challenge. What's a challenge that you have as you're thinking about teaching or coaching or whatever, running PDs, things like that. What's a challenge that you have, a place where you're either stuck or where you find yourself navigating uncharted territory? A compass is good for that too, if you're trying to do something new for the first time. Put your challenge on the top. And then start thinking about those observations. What are some things that you know that have worked or maybe need work in the future? What are some ideas? When ideas come up, don't judge them as good or bad. Just put them in there. What are some ideas that you have? And who are the people involved? But let's not get too experimental. Let's take a break and let's start by thinking about observations, making sure we have a clear vision of where we're headed, ideas, and who's involved. All of this is free on Ella's website, Innovators Compass. Take a moment and just jot down your observations, ideas, principles, and people. Go ahead. Again, principles, that's just your build. That's just what you said teaching math is. You can put that in there. It's about a puzzle. It's about looking at the space. It's about...
Does the Julie Andrews thing fit in here somewhere?
If you want to put Julie Andrews in here, that's always an idea. How can Julie Andrews? I often use zombies. I force my students to come up with an idea that involves zombies. My students use this for lesson planning, and when they're lesson planning, they're coming up with something for statistics. And I say, okay, you need a zombie activity. It just helps them to be creative in the way that they're thinking about these things. They do, they're great. Experiments can be the scary part. It's trying something new. It's being worried about being judged. So focus on your experiments. Take that idea of maybe it's about asking questions. You're trying to create a new course. Maybe instead of developing the course, it's asking questions about where can I find material. So what's the experiment? What's the thing that you can try on Monday? This is a place where if you need help from collaboration, go ahead and ask some other people some ideas about what they might do. But give yourself a couple of minutes to think about an experiment to try.
September, they're kind of getting their ideas and starting. But we design it.
Yeah, so that, like, you all brought it up, right, the focus, right? And so one of the other things that when I do a long presentation, think about, we talk about this flare and focus. When you're in observation, you gather as much information as possible.
Oh, yes,
When you're in principles, you're focused.
It was good.
I'm not gonna get pulled in
Right, you
lots of
could tie
different
it into
directions.
that.
There's lots of things I could pay
Oh, I
attention
like that.
to in this description. So do we have someone who'd be willing to share an experiment that they're going to try to do on Monday?
I'm gonna open up the document you sent me.
You're going to open up the document I sent you from Jeff Krall's about problem-based learning.
Yep.
That's all you have to do, right? And then make observations. Keep in mind what your build was and what's important. Is it still what's important? This whole idea of believe and what our values are informing our work is important. Otherwise, we're just going through the motions. If you're planning a lesson, one is definitely to be able to just test it out. But you can also, hopefully, if you're in a collaborative team, you can share it with somebody else and ask them, what do you think? And get some feedback with that. One of the recurring themes is this idea of the diamond dogs. Coach Beard says the diamond dogs are a group of, and we're going to use educators, committed to supporting each other by sharing their intimate thoughts, feelings, and experiences. You in or out? And feelings is an important piece of this. In the longer version of the recording with Ella, she really laid out the importance of, as educators, we need to think about feelings. So you've got a feedback form. What were some things that you liked about this was an experiment? Okay, what were some things that we should do if we do future experiments? What would some things that you take away from this experiment, some ideas that you have, and what some questions you have that you still have? And you don't have to fill out all of them, but we would certainly appreciate your feedback will make it better for us.
And Dave has a handy suggestion box for you.
Oh, look at that.
Whoa,
That's
of course,
fancy.
of course you do. Liking the show.
That's fancy.
And again, we do have a podcast. If you have ideas, we're still looking.
You don't have to talk about the show. It's just talking about teaching. I think our guests probably run close to 50-50.
Thank you so much. You had lots of choices, especially this last day and with weather looming. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.